Hello everyone, today I will be reviewing A Night at the Opera. So, A Night at the Opera came out in 1935 and was directed by Sam Wood, and this film is a comedy and it stars the Marx Brothers. This was actually the first Marx Brothers film to not star Zeppo, so this film has the three main Marx Brothers in it, who are Groucho, Chico and Harpo. And this film is actually about these two opera stars, Rosa and Rodolfo, and they go aboard this ocean liner on the way to the United States of America. And in fact, most of this film is actually set on board this ocean liner. We also have this other opera star, who's known as Ricardo, and he is in love with Rosa. But obviously, when all this is happening, we also have the Marx Brothers in the situation as well. So Groucho Marx, he plays this rich man who is in love with this lady who's played by Margaret Dumont, and Margaret Dumont actually appears in quite a lot of the Marx Brothers films. We also get Chico Marx, who plays Ricardo's manager, and then we get Harpo Marx, he plays Rodolfo's dresser, and since Rodolfo is not a very nice guy, poor Harpo gets treated quite badly in this film. So this was the first time that I'd ever seen this film, and it's actually only the second Marx Brothers film that I've seen. The other Marx Brothers film I've seen is Duck Soup, and when I'm comparing this to Duck Soup, in all honesty, this isn't quite as good as Duck Soup, though it is a very funny film. Duck Soup is very wacky and crazy, and the plot in that film is a bit ridiculous, to be honest, whereas the plot in this film is actually fairly realistic, and you can really see this happening as a proper story, even if the Marx Brothers weren't in it. But nevertheless, the Marx Brothers do bring a lot of humour to this film, and it's a very enjoyable watch. And there are loads of brilliant jokes scattered throughout this film, particularly with Groucho Marx. He has lots of witty one-liners, as he does in all his films. He really is the vocal comedy aspect of the film in terms of actually telling jokes. Obviously, Harpo Marx is a mute, so a lot of his comedy is very physical with the way he is acting, and Chico Marx is always there in the background or at the front, having a laugh and making a few jokes and being an excellent presence on screen. So altogether, there are actually lots of funny bits throughout this film. I think possibly my favourite scene in the film is when they're aboard the ocean liner and poor old Groucho Marx, he is stuck in this tiny room, and the room just has a bed and a giant suitcase, and that's about it, and a tiny sink in the corner. And all of a sudden it turns out that Chico and Harpo and also Ricardo, they have smuggled into a suitcase, and then they all appear in the room. So there's these four guys in this tiny little room. All of a sudden someone knocks at the door, an engineer comes in, then afterwards a manicure comes in, and then some waiters come in to deliver the food, and all of a sudden this room is really crowded. Everyone is jumping on top of each other, climbing everywhere. It's a really funny scene. And then Margaret Dumont's character knocks on the door, they open it, and everybody spills out onto the floor. And obviously it's a very physical joke, so it's very funny as you watch it on screen, and it's certainly one of the highlights of the film. Another brilliant scene is when this man is searching for Chico and Harpo because they're basically stowed away illegally and they're hiding, and he's looking around these rooms everywhere trying to find him, and all of a sudden these characters, they are having to move the beds out of the way and go outside on the balcony and come back in again. And just the way this whole sequence is arranged is really clever, and it must have been really well thought out. You can certainly tell when you're watching a Marx Brothers films that a lot of the jokes are actually very intelligent and are all just put in the exact right place, and they all end up working together so well in the context of the story. So like I said earlier, the story in this is actually fairly realistic, and it's quite clever the way they manage to work these jokes in and also create a very believable story with some excellent humour in it. Now, as I did say, I do prefer Duck Soup, and I think the jokes in Duck Soup tend to just stand out a bit more in my mind. There are so many funny jokes in Duck Soup. In this film, there are lots of funny jokes. There's just not quite as many big jokes, or not quite as many memorable sequences as there are in Duck Soup, from what I can remember. Watched it last night. I enjoyed it quite a bit. However, it just didn't have that extra push that Duck Soup has. And although, if I'm being honest, although Zeppo was in Duck Soup, he didn't have a massive part in that film anyway. So perhaps this film wasn't necessarily missing Zeppo, and it certainly had lots of jokes in it. And this film also tries to do the romantic subplot as well, like a lot of the Marx Brothers films do. But this film actually manages to work that romantic subplot into the story very well. And in fact, there are actually quite a few scenes in this film that don't have the Marx Brothers in at all. They just have Rosa and Ricardo, and they're actually singing to each other while one is on the boat and one is down below. And these scenes are obviously opera, which obviously comes from the title Night at the Opera. In general, the Marx Brothers films do have musical elements to them. There's this excellent sequence on the ship when Ricardo is singing this song, Cosi Cosa, and it's a very catchy song and everybody is singing along to it. So overall, I have to say, A Night at the Opera, a really good comedy. One of the best classic comedies of all time, really. Not as good as Duck Soup in my opinion, however, still very amusing and still a very good comedy. I always am surprised by how well the jokes in Marx Brothers film hold up nowadays. Bear in mind this film is 85 years old, so obviously some of it will seem dated obviously, but actually a lot of the jokes, they still made me laugh and I had a very good time. Having said that, it's probably not necessarily one of the films I would come back to straight away as a classic comedy. For some reason, it doesn't quite stand out in my mind as much as ones like Duck Soup. Nevertheless, I do recommend it and it's an excellent comedy. So I'm going to give A Night at the Opera a rating of 8 out of 10. It's a fantastic comedy and well worth seeing. So if you enjoy these old classic comedies, this is definitely one that has to be watched. So there we go. So that is my review of A Night at the Opera. So what do you guys think? Have you seen A Night at the Opera? Do you like the Marx Brothers? Please let me know down in the comment section below. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.